What's up, everybody? Mark with Cardivox Academy here, and today we're doing something extra special. Now, if you've been a fan of the channel or watched the channel or hated the channel and checked in to just laugh at it, you know that of all the genres of metal, black metal tends to be my favorite. Now, there are all sorts of types of black metal, and we've covered like Dimmu Borgir, I'll never know how to say it properly, and that certainly falls within the realm. But today we're doing something that kind of gets a little bit more towards my preferred side of the black metal world. We're going to be talking about a band called Ghostbath. There's a new video that released recently called Convince Me to Bleed, and this is off their upcoming album Loather, which releases October 29th. And I've actually got the vocalist Dennis here with me, and I'm very excited to talk with him because he's got a very interesting approach to vocals. I've heard vocals are a little bit different here, so this is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. But before we jump into that, if you're new to the channel, we take the reaction format, we break it down, we try to make it educational, so you actually get something out of it to maybe help you learn your own and progress your own vocal style. I myself am in 3 metal bands. Kardashev is the main gig. Neverbreath and Viremia are also out there in the ether, kind of doing their own thing. And I'm a vocal coach. I predominantly help people make all these gurgly, squawky, squeaky, screamy vocal noises. So if you're interested in any of that, check out the links in the description below. And whenever we do these co-reactions, there's often a lot of content that doesn't make it to the end. If you want to see the content that gets cut, we do post that on our Patreon, along with letting you get access to our Discord, which has all sorts of cool events. There's tons of stuff. It's a lot of fun. So anyways, that's enough of that chatter. Let's go ahead and let's get Dennis in here. Dennis, what's up? Good to see you. Good to have you hanging out with us.
Hey, Mark. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me on, and I'm interested what you have to say about my vocals here. So,
yeah, it's going to be kind of fun. So I actually was very into the Moon Lover album. I remember when it came out, y'all did a tour and you came through. Well, I think it's Mesa, but you came through Arizona, and I remember seeing y'all live at the Underground. That was a long time ago, but I don't know if you remember that venue. It's basically like a lot of other venues, a basement with tons of graffiti. And I remember watching y'all play live, and this is back before I was into black metal as much. And I remember just being like, what's happening? Like, what? Y'all like walked off, came back in like these white robes, and I was like, what is even going on? But I remember at the end of it, I had a kind of a feeling that was different than I've had at other metal shows, where I was very like confused, but in an intrigued sort of way. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I was like, I don't really understand this. I got to go home. I got to check it out. And I did, and I really dug it. Now, this was a long time ago, but I don't know. That was kind of my reaction to the seeing y'all live. So I'm interested to see how this song goes, especially because I guess I hear vocally it's kind of new. Can you give me like a preview of some of the different directions you've taken vocally, or should I just go in blind? What do you think?
I can give you a little bit of a preamble to the video. So previously, my vocals were completely sort of a high-pitched screech, basically like screaming in agony. It was completely done on the spot. There were no lyrics. I would go into the studio and do them all in one take. I would just get myself in a certain mindset, go through the song, and that would be my vocal take. In music, I'm very much a fan of just doing things emotionally and not really thinking too hard about it, and just letting whatever art you want to create just come out from inside of you, and not to overanalyze things.
Right.
And so that worked for a little while, but I knew with this new album we had to take it a different direction. And also I would always lose my voice on tour, and I knew I just couldn't sustain doing those kinds of screams where on a 3-week tour, a week and a half, 2 weeks, I wouldn't have a voice, and I couldn't do the vocals anyway. So with this one, I wanted to do some different vocal techniques, ones that I could actually sustain a longer tour, go for a month, 2 months, whatever I need, and just give us a heavier sound and a different sound. And so, yeah, I employ probably like 4 different techniques now. I still use the high pitched scream, but that's more of an accent instead of the main vocals for the song.
That's a turn. That's a definite turn. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and let's check it out. I mean, now I'm like double excited to see what this is going to be all about. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's check out Ghost Bath, Convince Me to Bleed. Let's go. All right, so that's a pretty decent place for us to stop. There's never a good place for us to stop. I'm always gonna have to interrupt the song in some sort of horrific way, but you know that's kind of how it works. So yeah, this is way different. This is way different than you know what your previous work was. One thing I think is really cool is that you're using a really versatile vocal style, which is just kind of this like relaxed, you know, sort of almost soft palatal. And I mean, you're totally welcome to correct me here. But like this very relaxed sort of like sound. And you can do so much with that. You can tilt it up to a high. You can, as I heard you do, kind of move it down to a low with the shape of your mouth. And that's a good direction to go because it sounds very black metal and it also sounds easy to move. So that kind of makes me think, when you made the decision, when you were like, I want to do more than these like high pitched wails, I want to get some actual screaming into it. I guess this is a 2-part question for you, but feel free to just be as long winded as you want because that's what we're all here for. That's what we're all here for. So number one, had you played around with these types of vocals before? And I guess if not, or even if so, did you have a target sound that you were going for, or was this more like kind of what you said at the beginning of the video? You just kind of got into a room and started making gurgly noises, and this is what happened. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, these vocals were a big process, a long process for me, and because I've never done vocals like this before, my previous bands were also kind of voiced, emotional type vocals. It was more hardcore type stuff, and so yeah, I'd never done kind of a voiceless gurgly type sound before, and to be honest, it clicked when I saw one of your videos and you were talking about just sort of the air going through your throat and like the flaps doing the work, and you don't put a voice to it, and you can get it higher or lower just by your mouth shape and kind of how your body's positioned. And for some reason, when I heard that, it just kind of clicked with me. And I was in my car. I lived in an apartment, so I wasn't practicing vocals in my apartment, but I'd be in my car and I would like hear, I started with the lows. So like sort of a death metal low. And then I kind of just pushed the air through and I was like, oh, okay, this doesn't hurt at all. But I'm like getting that low, like just coming through that like that. That's so easy. And like, I can just do that on command. And it just clicked. And as soon as that clicked, I'm like, okay, so like, what can I do to make it sound exactly how I want? And I went through it was sort of like a ritual type thing, but also to like help physically prepare my body. So before coming up with the vocals and recording them, especially, I went off of no sugar, no carbs. I was fasting every day. I was drinking a ton of water and no alcohol. And I just read up, you know, like things that can really like mess with your throat, like alcohol can dry you out, like carbonated water. I was very focused and I did that every day for like 60 days before recording the album. And I could really tell the difference. And like, so I'd wake up every day. I would have a cup of coffee, and then all I would have to drink the rest of the day is water. I would practice vocals for about half an hour a day. I didn't want to like overdo it, and just to where
Right.
I got into that perfect groove of what I wanted to sound like, and
Yeah.
practice guitar once a day. I just had this whole regimen, and I've never done something like that before. Like I said before, I would just go into the studio, whatever came out, and this time it was kind of like more calculated. And
Sure.
one more thing that really helped me is hearing somebody else do those kinds of vocals right before I did them. So I would play like for the lows, if I listened to something like Tomb Mold or something where he does a very low vocal, all I'd have to do is hear it for a few seconds, and I'm like, okay. And then it was in my head, and I could, get into that sound.
Nice.
Almost like parroting it a bit.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I've never thought to do that. I've never thought to like have another sound in my ear, listen to it for a couple seconds, and then go. But I can totally see how that would help, because once we start to get a handle on these sounds, one thing I say to a lot of my students is like, how to mimic sounds. That's how we learn language. Like when we were little, like, babies in the crib, like our mom didn't pick us up and say like, okay, honey, you're going to put your lips together and you're going to build up a little bit of air and then activate your vocal folds and then release a little bit of that air. And that's going to be a B sound. And then you're like, okay, cool, you got it. Your mom was just like, ba, and you repeated, right? And that's, that method of understanding language kind of goes with us for the rest of our lives. So it's really cool. I've like literally never thought of that. But that's something to think about. Now, I definitely commend you for the care that you gave your voice before recording. I think out of everyone I've ever like interviewed or talked to, that's the most intense. That's the most, like, 60 days. Holy cow. I mean, that's amazing. Even for me, like if I'm going to be like recording like an entire album, like we're going to be in Knoxville in October doing that. For me, like I was planning like a week, right? So you're serious about it. That's awesome. Well, cool. That's really amazing insight. I want to go back a little bit so people can kind of hear what you're doing. I already have like 4 other questions, but we should listen to this song probably. So I'm going to go back. I don't know, probably around, I feel like it kind of really picked up around the 30-second marker, maybe 25 seconds. You know what? I'm going to click here because 25 is a good number. Here we go. Yeah. Oh, that's going to be a good lead. So we're going to give it its due. But a couple questions I have for you here. So far, just like kind of my feelings on the song, right? Which I always kind of feel weird about. Like, who wants to hear that? But I guess maybe people do. So one thing I'm really loving is the production on your voice, right? Obviously, as a vocalist, I mostly listen to vocals. That's the main thing I'm listening to. I love like the tremolo picking, like ambient guitars in the background. I'm loving, the sort of like, now I'm not a drummer, so people always tease me for my drum terminology, but like the slower blast beats going on in the back, if that's a slow blast beat's even a thing. But the main thing I'm noticing is the production on your vocals. And I'm like, in a way, I'm vibing with you because I'm going to ask you, because this is the most common negative feedback I get on my vocals in Kardashev's music. They're always like, the vocals are so quiet. And I'm like, I know that. right? Like, I love the fact that they're slightly farther back. They're slightly kind of washed a little bit. And one thing that I'm enjoying about it is it's kind of reminiscent to me of the production you had on the high pitched wails in your earlier stuff. Um, did you want to keep them kind of more part of the music like before, or I don't know, kind of just tell me about the decisions that went into the vocal production because it's really cool. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we've always been a band that likes just the wall of sound, especially live,
Mm,
where everything's a bit more even. You can kind of hear everything, but it's all mixed in. And I think that just gives a certain atmosphere to the song.
hmm
A lot of the times, if you have a sound person at a venue, they're going to turn up the drums, the kick drum, and the vocals over everything. And
Yep.
I don't really like that sound live, honestly. I like a lot of guitar. And I think mixing the vocals in a little bit just helps with the atmosphere of the song. And actually, these are louder. I slowly got them louder with each mix. So they did start even lower because
Really?
I told them I wanted them pretty mixed in. And then I was like, okay, we can go a
Mm,
little louder. We can go a little louder. I think uh, we reach a certain point. I'm like, okay, I can hear them, but they're not overpowering anything else. And it's just like
yeah.
part of the song. Because before my voice was just another instrument without
Mm,
lyrics, without, it was just another sound as part of the song. Now that I have lyrics, it can be a little bit louder so you can hear what's going on, but I still didn't want it to overpower, and I wanted the guitars to shine through, the drums to shine through, just so you can, if you want to listen for a certain thing, it's there for you. You don't have to like listen past the super loud vocals or anything like that.
yeah, I think that that's a really kind of wonderful way to view it. In a genre of music like I like this definitely, of course, as we all know, falls under the black metal. I think you were telling me earlier that a lot of people prescribe this as depressive black metal, right? That's not a very like expositional genre, right? It's a genre that definitely has a lot of talent and technique to it, but it's not like deathcore, right? It's not like deathcore, which is basically like how much can I fit into this amount of space. And so I think that's a really kind of smart way. You're giving the listener kind of a choice. Like, you want to focus on the vocals? Hell yeah, here you go. You more of a guitar guy, you more of a drum guy, these things are there for you as well. And I really dig that. That's actually really interesting insight. I never really thought about it as kind of like a way to give options. But it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Um, any other thoughts? I'm going to go back and I always like to go back a little bit so people can kind of hear what we're talking about. Any other thoughts on the vocals that you want to point out before I take us back a couple
Just something
seconds?
you said earlier, about it being super relaxed. I thought that was kind of funny because if you had seen me in the studio, I get really like animated and I'm super like my muscles get really tense and I'm like
Mm,
my hands are doing all like the catatonic type thing. And so I don't know when you said, "Oh yeah, it's like really relaxed." I just thought that was kind of funny. Because I get myself into the same mindset as I did before when I was just doing the
yeah.
pure emotional wails, but
Yeah.
I just kind of incorporated that into these vocal techniques at the same time. And so I'm like super emotional, super in a certain mindset when I'm going, but then I just after doing it for 60 days, my muscle memory was good enough to where I could still do those type of vocals and still uh, do the pure emotional thing. So
Yeah, you actually are leaning into a really important concept with an additional part of being a vocalist, which of course we know not everybody has to be, but many of us are performers in addition to the to being a vocalist, and sometimes performing is tapping into that. I think people hear performer and they think putting on an act, but I don't think that's always the case. Tapping into that emotional space is really important, and you had mentioned that these vocals weren't hurting you. Let me ask you, did you have any pain or discomfort? Now, of course, you might have felt like you had a day of exercise, like a day of working out, but did you have like any pain or strain or discomfort when doing these vocals, or was it a lot different than when you were doing the high pitched wails before?
I think at first, when I was first learning, I don't know if it's because I
Hmm
wasn't doing them perfectly right, or if it was because it was
Mm,
something new to me. The next day, my throat would be a little raw, a little scratchy. But over
mm,
time, it just became sort of. I don't know if I built up something, but whatever I was doing, it did not hurt at all doing these two vocals.
Yeah.
And I saved. So as I mentioned, I still do like the high pitch type stuff. I save those for
Right.
last after doing all the scratchier stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the reason I asked is because eventually that's really interesting to know. So essentially, like, yeah, over time you figured out how to do it properly. You learned how to find that balance, which not everybody can do on their own. So kudos to you. Great job. But you know, a lot of times when we hear relaxed, we're like, what does that mean? What does that make sense? Well, if you think about like a basketball, I almost said basketball. If you think about a basketball player or a martial artist or something, like they have to have a certain level of relaxation to be able to react, to move, you know, to dodge around other players and things like that. And yet a lot of their body is tensed, right? Because they're pushing on their legs. They're like, you know, jerking their shoulders and their back around. So oftentimes doing relaxed vocals isn't necessarily saying like, oh, well, our whole body is like, you know, World of Warcraft at home mode. You know, it's saying that we are activating the right parts of the body while letting the others relax. So you found out how to do that. You found your way there. So dude, good job to you. Hats off to you, sir. But yeah, good job there. Yeah, let's go back. Oh, let's do 1 minute even. Let's do 1 minute even. Because I like this song and I want to hear more of it. Hell yeah. Yes. So I think I heard one of those high pitched wails behind the screams just now. Am I right, or is my brain just looking for stuff?
Yep. No, you're right. So there's sort of the mid stuff and then the lows, and then I did sort of the mid with the high at the same time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Now, let's just keep listening. I'll ask you more questions later. This is good stuff. There it is. Oh, we're gonna listen to that transition. So now that we've heard those high pitched wails in the background, I think this is a good spot to talk about them, because I don't think there's a single video. Maybe the Oransi Pazuzu song I did like a year and a half ago had something similar, and I'm just saying maybe because that's the only thing I can think that possibly would have had it. But I think a lot of my audience is not going to be familiar with that sound. Now, of course, my audience listens to a lot of stuff and watches a lot of other channels. So I'm not trying to say that this is where they get all their information, but I do think that it's likely that there's a good portion of people who that's a really new sound to them that they may not be used to. So, you know, obviously at some point that's a sound that I really like. Like you said, it's mixed in. It's more about being emotional and conveying a message than it is about lyrics or words or anything like that. But I'd just be kind of interested to hear a little bit more detail of where that came from, how you decided to do it. Because at some point you were like, this is the sound. This is the one I want. And you've been using it for a while. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So that vocal style is just very prominent in the depressive black metal genre. So anyone who listens to that is going to be very familiar with it. And it's a very polarizing sound.
Yeah.
I remember when we were first touring, we had people in the audience, the same show, come up to me saying, "Oh, that was hilarious. I was laughing." And the same show, somebody come up saying, "Oh, I like teared up. I was crying." And to me,
Mm.
that's really cool to me. I like that it can have such a strong reaction and such a different reaction just with the same exact sound.
Yeah.
So the layering part, I got the idea. We had some guest vocals for the album. We had CJ from Thy Art Is Murder, and when he sent it,
Yo,
I didn't even
nice.
think. I don't know. It wasn't even a technique that I had considered, and so when he sent them, and it was like a layer to it, I was like, oh, I can layer stuff, and so it was kind of a last minute decision in the studio where I was like, I
Yeah.
could layer the higher pitched vocals with my more black metal ones, and
Yeah.
I went through and like chose where that sounded best. Um, but yeah, I mean the main band for me who does it the most ridiculous and the craziest, if you haven't heard them, they're called Silencer, and
Mm-mm.
that is what got me into this whole thing because at first I was laughing listening to it, just showing people because I thought it was funny. And then I started
Yeah.
liking it unironically, and you know how that goes. So I started going down that rabbit hole, and it just made sense to me. You know, when you're crying, you're not rasping out your cries. You're wailing. You're using your voice, and so that's kind of the idea. I think with it being sort of a depressive, sad genre that
Right.
you're crying out, and it just feels more natural to cry out like with a voice kind of like that. So
Yeah, and I think you kind of touch on something else that's really important, which is that like when you cry, you're also not necessarily worried about like fitting into a specific technique or sound. And I think that well, I mean, I guess you would be because you're in the studio, but like when you're like in real life and like the pits of despair and emotion, you're not thinking about like, should I like kind of glissando into this, or should I trail off? Should I cut it sharp? And I think that that's not only really cool as far as the message you're trying to convey, but I think it's a really large significant difference between different metal genres. Some genres, and when I say stuff like this, I'm not faulting any genre. I'm glad that we have all of these different approaches. But I think that that's something that you get. Some genres are more message based, and some genres are more technique based. Though it's not to say that they don't share both, and that's really fascinating. Um, Now, I'm also kind of curious. So, what was your decision for this album to actually start using lyrics and all these different vocal styles? I mean, you've mentioned a couple times that it's something that you wanted to do, but what was kind of like the tipping point where you're like, yeah, it's time to do more harsh. I hesitate to say traditional, but you know what I mean. Traditional screams over the music. What kind of went into that?
I mean, this is like the third part of a trilogy of albums, and I'd always thought
Mm,
this would be the heaviest album. And I had heard like lower vocals used before in depressive black metal. There's a band called Ue Roll,
mm,
a Spanish band. They use the lows, and it's very cool. And I thought this could make it heavier. This could solve my problem of losing my voice all the time. And
mm.
I just don't want to like do the same thing over and over. I like to change it up. I like to grow. And so this just
Sure.
felt like a natural next step for me where, okay, we haven't done lyrics for like 3 full albums and an EP. I've done the Whales only for 3 full albums and an EP. It's time to just move on and do something new. And I knew like our voice would still come through because it's the same musicians writing the songs. And so it
Mm.
still sounds like Ghost Bath, but it just gave a different flavor and something new for people to be surprised by, which I've seen a lot of surprise on it, and just to enjoy. And
Yeah.
because of that, I had to make, that's why I was so intense on my like rituals and the way I approached it to make sure it sounded good. Because if you're going
Mm.
to do something new, you got to make sure you're doing it right and it actually sounds good, because people don't like change normally. So if we were going to change this much, we had to kind of nail it. So I just wanted to make sure the vocals were done right.
That's true. I mean, change like after a while you do get like that desire to change, but then you're also like, yeah, I got to do this. I got to do this 100% the proper way. So, yeah, that's fascinating. Um Sorry, I had to turn off an electronic. We'll leave that in the video. None of us are perfect, right? Cool. Well, that's really interesting. I appreciate that information. So let's go ahead. Let's go back. We're gonna go right to the middle here. I really liked where I heard the song going here. Let's check this out. All right, everybody shut up. I want to hear that again. Holy crap, that was amazing. That was so cool. I have questions for you about that. For you about this. So that was really neat. I loved, by the way, for anybody wondering, everybody shut up is an inside joke between me and Nico. So you're all wonderful people. Nico's the guitarist in Kardashev. And whenever one of us does something good, we say, everybody shut up. So not everybody actually shut up, but this was really fascinating. I love how you bring in like this aggressive moment in the music and then everything cuts for just your voice. And then after your voice, so like we've got kind of like this low, like wall of sound. We cut and then your voice is filling in like kind of like this mid space. And then when we come back, we have these high pitched like tremolo picking guitars. That was so cool. I want to listen to it again because it's just that good. And then maybe we can talk about it. But holy crap, that was nuts, dude. That's my favorite part so far. Oh, that was so good. Tasty. Yes. Yeah, so first of all, in those isolated moments, your vocals sound awesome, dude. I love the raspy, thin, not thin as in weak, thin as in kind of airy tone. Like it sounds very exasperated, but in a really controlled way. So, that sounded so cool. Tell me about that cough that was going there. Does that fit into like the narrative, the lyrics? I'm sorry, whenever I get excited, I talk a lot. So I'm just gonna shut my mouth and let you do your thing because that was amazing.
Oh, you're fine. So with this whole song and actually all of our songs, we write all the music first and I do the vocals after and I apply them after. So with this part, I had no idea what I was going to do. And our guitarist, Tim, suggested that I do it in between, but not every time. And so that's kind of what we ended up with there. And yeah, I really like how it turned out. As far as like the cough, that's kind of part of depressive black metal as well. It was a real cough and we just left it in. So I like doing that kind of thing, just whatever's in the moment is happening. And I do that a lot on stage too. I'll just start coughing. Maybe it's a bad idea to do these days, but back in the day I used to cough on stage.
I mean, I can't say I've never coughed on stage, although I don't think I've ever thought to make it part of the performance, but it sounds really interesting. That definitely pulled me in quite a bit. Now, kind of building on the idea of like a narrative. So clearly there's some sort of narrative, there's some sort of story going on here. Is it something that's, well, tell us a little bit about that, or is it more abstract? Because it's interesting, like we're seeing the bones and the woods, and then you're walking through a very like modern city. All those images together are kind of contrasting, but really interesting as well. So tell me a little bit about that. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's pretty abstract with sort of concrete imagery that everyone would understand walking through the woods. The idea is basically me sort of thriving and looking for like negative feeling and emotion, and I don't know, the handing over of the skull is just kind of giving into it. And I guess you haven't got to the end part yet, but I'm handed back those vials and we all take a drink, and everyone else is kind of affected by it and they change, but I like stay the same. And that's kind of the idea behind the song. I kind of like, I just thrive on like negative feeling, and I'm really good at, it's called sublimation. It's the idea that you take something negative and you use that negative energy and transform it into something creative or constructive. And so for me, when I'm writing music or playing music, that's just all I'm focused on is that negative energy. And I think I've just become really good at doing that with those sorts of thoughts and feelings. And it's actually like I have a degree in psychology. It's actually a really healthy way to deal with those kinds of things. So yeah, I would recommend it to anyone else.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I always find that I write better when I am in a slightly more negative space. I don't know why. But I just always write a little bit better. And I think that's because, you know, maybe it gives you like a sense of release or something to do so. And like, I'm actually kind of, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm kind of struggling to write our new album's lyrics, because like this is a really great time in my life. Overall, I'm very happy. And so I'll sit down and I'm like, all right, time to talk about like, you know, the content of this album. And I'm just like, man, it's just not where my head's at. I'm in a good mood today, you know? So I know it's a lot more complex than that, but yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting for sure. I do the same thing, writing the lyrics, putting all the vocals in afterwards. Let's keep going though. There's plenty to talk about, I'm sure. Yo, I loved the ending of that song. It had so many things that when I'm listening to anything that falls under the umbrella of black metal that I listen for and that I love. One thing I always tell tell people who watch the channel, or anybody that really knows that I'm into metal, is like, if you show me a song and the song has a little bit of a pause and then a wall of sound and some blast beats and maybe some vocals, like, you know, that sound I'm talking about, like, I'm probably gonna at least like it pretty well. But I loved the pauses, and I love the movements of the guitars underneath. And I also like how you took a very pulsing approach, dum dum, to kind of give an anchor, because I think sometimes it's easy to get kind of lost in all the blast beats and the tremolo picking and the wall of sound, and that pulse kind of gave like an anchor point. So really, really awesome. I love that. And yeah, I would love to hear, I don't know, this is kind of a broad question, and if it's too vague, feel free to let me know, but I would love to hear, like, when you are putting your vocals down at the end, when you are kind of saying, okay, it's time for me to add my voice to this song, how do you kind of decide whether you want to be pulsing or fast, or maybe even to stay silent? Because that's you know, sometimes the better part of being a vocalist is knowing when to be quiet. I've learned that for myself, you know, plenty. So what kind of goes into your thought process of less of the vocal sound and more of the positioning and the metering of the vocals that you're going to be putting down?
Yeah, so this is the first time I've had to think about that. So
Right.
it took a while. It was a lot of trial and error. I sort of had 3 different vocal styles in mind, and when I would listen through, we had demo tracks of everything I already recorded, how they were going to be. And so I had the mids, the lows, and then the high wails. And those were the 3 categories. And as I went through each song, I'm like, okay, what would work best of those 3 styles here? And a lot of what I do is kind of like drawn out and long. And I think that's just sort of the atmospheric black metal type sound where it's just the vowels are all very longer. I'm not like super staccato and short. And so towards the end, when it gets a bit more intense, I wanted to sort of go a little bit faster. I don't know if it's just my own limitations as a vocalist, like being able to do it super quick, because I don't think I could if I really wanted to, at least not right now. I'd probably have to practice that. So, but I mean, that's what makes art is just like whatever you're limited by is what makes your own sound. It's not like if you have unlimited resources and you can unlimited skill, then you're going to make something totally different than, I have to write this in the studio today and I can't really do it that fast. It's going to create something different. And I think I just love every part of that process. And I like the limitations and I like it being a little bit more raw. And so, yeah, I mean, it was calculated where I'd be like, okay, mids here, lows here. But then in the studio, it wasn't, oh, this is exactly how I wrote it. It was, okay, this is what came out. Do I like that? Do I want to change it? And so, yeah, at the end, I wanted it to get really intense. And so I started doing it a little bit faster. And you could hear I have the higher wails behind that on that part. And it just, it sounded right to me. So.
Yo, I'm going to be real. You just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Like I'm not even kidding. So I've literally never had this thought in my life before. I've never thought, now I've always been one who's very positive about like the idea of like limitations and things like that. I'm always like, yeah, it's okay. Like it's not as big of a deal as most of us make it out to be. I mean, there's tons of stuff I can't do. Right. But I've never thought about your limitations kind of being another force in what creates a unique piece of art. I've literally never thought about that before, but it's like so entirely true because oftentimes, you know, when you have two people next to each other that can all do about, 50,000 things, you're going to hear an exposition of those 50,000 things and it can create a little bit of sameness. That's fascinating. I'm like literally going to have to like tonight, after my wife goes to bed and I'm like reading a book or playing some video games or whatever, I can just tell you that I'm going to be staring at the wall being like, what is life? Maybe limitations are good. Who am I now? But seriously, that's a really interesting insight. That's nuts. You blew my mind, right? That's the first time anybody's ever like literally made me go before on the channel, and you just did it. So hell yeah. Well, I'd like to listen to the outro again so that, all of the people who are watching this, I say right now, but in the future can kind of listen to the way you approach what we just talked about. Being slow, being methodic, and then speeding up near the end. And then I guess we can wrap it up. But yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that for a long time. You blew my mind, dude. All right, let's go 2:30 and let's just take the whole thing from there because there's a lot. There's so much here that I just absolutely love. Yeah, there's a lot to get lost in right there. Holy cow. And I just realized it because I paused it here. There is basically the band name right here in the video. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. So wow, hopefully I didn't just talk your ear off, but like I said, when I get excited and when I like stuff, I tend to get a little excited and chatty. But dude, I love this song. This is great stuff. And I love the approach that you decided to take with your vocals. I think you came across exceptionally well. So yeah, any other things you want to point out about the song, or any other insights you want to give? Because like you and I could talk about this video for another 3 hours, but I don't know if anybody's on YouTube land is really in for that, you know. So yeah, any other insights you have would be utterly fascinating to me.
Yeah, so my philosophy on on art and music was completely, I don't want to learn anything technical. I just want it to be like pure feeling. And I was sort of, I don't know if I'd call it afraid, but I was hesitant to actually take some techniques in mind with my vocals, and to actually sit down and like calculate and practice. And I just wanted to keep it as well, in my mind, it was as pure and as honest as possible. And I think you can still, I mean, I learned doing this album that you can still take in mind like different techniques. And so I wanted to thank you, obviously, because you were the reason I was able to even do these vocals, because it never clicked with me before. I was always like, I'll just scream as loud as I can, and that's how you do it. But when you explained pushing your air through your throat and just the flaps in your throat doing the work, that whatever you said, that's probably not an exact quote. That just clicked with me, and it just, from there on, I was able to do it. And so thank you for that. And I think you can still be honest and pure with your art, and create something good, even if you're like a bit calculated and figuring out the techniques and, you know, thinking about that at the same time. So yeah, I was a little bit like, back in the day, I was so intense with it that I would play the guitar parts, and I'd mess up a guitar part on a take, and I would just leave it in, because I'm like, all right, this is part of the song. This is what I played at the time. This is the most honest part. So you can hear on my earlier albums, there's a lot of like mispickings and stuff. And that was part of our sound then. But, you know, there's different approaches. And I think, I didn't lose any of, you know, my voice or myself by employing techniques that actually took some practice and some thought behind them. So
yeah, well, I mean, I think you said it best. Like, this is like, to me anyways, this is very much still Ghost Bath. This is very much still Ghost Bath, and it still hits with the same emotionality. Like, you can still get kind of like caught up in like this very kind of contemplative, kind of like rewardingly dark space, I think, which is part of the reason why so many people who love black metal, right? And thank you for the kind words, man. I was not aware that my videos were so helpful to you, but that's like literally the reason I do this is to try to be helpful. So that makes me feel real good, dude. It makes me feel real good. Who knew that at the end of this song I'd be feeling pretty positive? So anyways, yeah, thank you so much for being on the channel, man. I really appreciate it. You know, I'm sure that I'm gonna love the rest of the album that comes out, again, called Self-Loather. You say it, because I apparently can't speak English. Tell us about your album coming out.
Self-Loather, yeah. It comes out near Halloween, October 29th. You can pre-order it now if you
awesome
want.
Pre-order it now, folks. The link is down below if you do want to pre-order it. But as always, thank you all for being here. Dennis, thank you for being here. Everybody who is watching this with us as it plays, thank you for being with us. And that's it. Check us out on Patreon. Hit me up for lessons. But as always, just watching the video is the most appreciated thing. Many thanks. Much love. I'm out.